Okay, so let's talk about something I think a lot of us can relate to, language learning. We all want to be able to actually speak a new language, right? Not just memorize words for a test. Well, it turns out some methods are way better at getting us there than others. Let's dive into one of the most radical ideas out there.
So, does this sound familiar? You've spent years, maybe in high school or college, studying a language. You can ace a grammar quiz, you know tons of vocabulary, but the moment a native speaker walks up and asks you a simple question, you just freeze. It's a super common, super frustrating experience, and it points to a huge flaw in the way we used to teach languages.
You see, for centuries, we're talking from like the 1600s to the 1800s, language learning in the West was pretty much dominated by one single approach. It was originally made for learning classical Latin and Greek, and it was called the grammar translation method. And here's the thing you got to understand about the grammar translation method. It was never really about speaking. Not at all. The whole point was to help you read old literature and philosophy. A typical class was all about memorizing long vocabulary lists, breaking down every single grammar rule, and then just translating texts, word for painful word. The result? You got really good at translation, but you couldn't actually use the language to, talk to another human being.
This quote just nails the problem, doesn't it? The language wasn't treated like a living, breathing thing. It was like a frog in a biology class, a dead specimen to be dissected into its parts. Students were learning a collection of nouns and verbs, but they had no idea how to put them together to have a real conversation. And because so many people were failing to become fluent, it was clear something had to change.
So around the late 19th century, a bunch of reformers had this totally radical thought. They said, wait a minute, what if we've been doing this all wrong? What if we should learn a second language the same way we all learned our first one, naturally? And that idea, that simple idea, became the foundation for a brand new approach.
And that brings us to the direct method. You might also hear it called the natural method. The philosophy behind it is so simple, but it's also incredibly powerful. You should learn a new language just like you learned your own as a baby. I mean, think about it. As a toddler, you didn't have grammar books or flashcards, right? You were just immersed in the language, connecting words directly to the world around you. And that is the entire goal here.
So this leads us to the one single, non-negotiable rule of the direct method. No translation ever. Your native language is completely forbidden in the classroom. The whole reason it's called the direct method is because meaning is supposed to be connected directly to the target language. How? Well, through things you can see and touch. Demonstrations, pictures, objects, gestures. You don't learn that the French word pomme means apple. You learn it because the teacher holds up a real apple and says, pomme. See? Direct connection.
So let's get into the rule book here. How do you actually build a classroom around this one simple idea? Well, it's all guided by a few core principles that make sure that no translation rule is followed. Okay, so first, obviously, your native tongue is out the window. Second, the vocabulary you learn isn't from some ancient poem. It's everyday, practical stuff you can actually use. Now, grammar is where it gets really interesting. It's taught inductively. That means instead of the teacher explaining a rule, they just give you tons of examples, and your brain starts to figure out the pattern on its own, naturally. And just like a kid, you focus on speaking and listening first, way before you worry about reading and writing. The ultimate goal here, the holy grail of language learning, is to get you to actually think in the target language without that little translation step happening in your head all the time.
So that's the theory, but what does this actually look like in a real classroom? What would you see if you walked in the door? Well, it's way more active and honestly probably louder than you'd expect.
A lot of the time, a lesson will follow this pretty simple 5-step loop. The teacher shows you something, a picture, an object, or they'll do an action. Then they say the word for it, nice and clear. Then you try to say it back. The teacher gently corrects you, kind of molding your pronunciation. And finally, everybody in the class repeats it again and again. It's this simple, active cycle of show, say, try, and repeat.
And this basic loop is then practiced with all kinds of different activities, all happening, of course, in the target language. We're talking rapid-fire question and answer drills, lots of conversation practice, even things like dictation or map drawing, where the teacher gives you directions and you have to draw what they say. Every single activity is designed to get you using the language, not just analyzing it.
Now, as amazing and revolutionary as this all sounds, the direct method wasn't a perfect silver bullet. It had some really powerful strengths, for sure, but it also came with some huge weaknesses that, in the end, kept it from taking over the world.
And this table really lays it all out.
On the plus side, it's amazing for building real fluency and making the language feel natural. You get that direct link between a word and an idea, and it's super engaging. But the downsides are pretty massive. For one, you need teachers who are incredibly fluent, almost native level, and that's just hard to find. It's also really tough to do in a big public school class with 30 kids. And let's be real, how do you visually explain an abstract idea like justice or economy? Plus, for a total beginner, being thrown into a class with zero translation can be, well, pretty overwhelming.
So even though the pure, super strict, direct method kind of fell out of fashion by the 1920s, its story definitely doesn't end there. Its core ideas were so powerful that they ended up changing language education forever.
And this right here is the main takeaway. The direct method basically kicked off a whole new era of thinking about how to teach languages. You'd have a hard time finding a school today that uses the pure 100% direct method. But its spirit, its DNA is everywhere. The modern focus on communicative learning, using the language for real-world tasks, focusing on interaction, immersing students, all of that can be traced right back to this one big idea.
So we'll end with this question to think about. The direct method threw down a challenge. Could you actually build an entire new language in your head from scratch without ever using the crutch of your native tongue? It's a really demanding way to learn, for sure, but it forces us to ask what it truly means to learn a language, and not just translate it.